So it's so funny you say that because, architecture and design world, you're meant to be thinkers, you're meant to be such creative people, but the practicality comes into it in some way, shape, or form, then it not limits you, I would say, but then you have to abide by these guidelines.
Which is where we have a slightly wrong position. Creativity for the heck of creativity
Is not
creativity.
Yeah, okay.
Responsible way, and I will bring this back again because in the middle you also said the word sustainability,
Yeah.
and I will call it responsibility. And I'm not talking about some one-off school which will say हम तो sustainability करते हैं,
Yeah, okay.
because आज कोई डेट में बोल नहीं सकता कि नहीं हम sustainability नहीं करते, तो सब बोलेंगे हम sustainability करते हैं,
In some way,
right?
yeah.
सब बोलेंगे नहीं technology तो integrated है,
हाँ,
right?
हाँ.
But on the ground this has not actually been implemented. It's not happened, and the students are suffering because of it.
So, you spoke about communication, you spoke about a little bit of practicality that are perhaps the critical skills that a designer should have. Is there anything else that makes them stand out?
And I think the students of this generation can actually become the beacons of that hope that we have, that you have to set the things right, that I'm sorry to say my generation is messed up.
Yeah.
Because it's my generation that has caused all of this.
How often is the curriculum revised?
Right?
So
if you want to do a PhD,
yeah,
it has to have deeper meaning than just getting that degree.
Yeah. Today, we will be talking about architecture, but the flip side of it, the practice side that no one really talks about. This has been a really interesting conversation that I've had with Professor Amrita Madan. She's not only a professor, a teacher, but also an architect and experiential designer. She's led many universities and is currently doing a PhD thesis on the topic of systemic relationship between education and practice. This conversation has been a real eye-opener for me, but as someone who's been outside of the industry, but I'm sure a lot of students and existing architects will be able to drive value out of what the conversation entails. Let's dive into this chat, one dialogue at a time. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am really looking forward to this conversation. Well, personally, I do not come from this background. So, mere liye, it's something which, I will be as a student sitting in front of you and talking about questions that, people should be asking, or perhaps they've asked you already. But I'm going to delve into the topic of your PhD thesis first and ask you, what is it about? And how did you actually come about on this particular topic?
Yeah, I think, thanks for that question because it's so close to my heart and right now so close to what I'm doing currently.
Yeah.
So, but, please tell me when you want me to stop because I'm going to go on rambling about it. For me, the PhD itself has been a journey. Why I am doing what I'm doing has its roots way back when I did my architecture as a student and did my MPhil in France, and then decided that this is something I want to explore. Where I started exploring even over there in France was the relationship between people, users and architects. Who are we building for? Why are we building the way we are doing? And what is the way to incorporate or reintegrate the human side of things, or the people, their emotions, their experiences back into architecture, because we seem to have dissociated these two things.
Yeah.
We build solid buildings,
yeah.
bricks and mortar, and we forget that it's going to be inhabited and it's going to be lived by people.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's the reason why our cities are in such a mess, because we've kind of disassociated these two things. So it was way back in 2001-2 when I was actually doing my MPhil, when I was working in France, but my work was based in Delhi.
Yeah.
And I was called a militant at that time because I was saying that the role of the architect has to redefine itself, not the role of the people. Mm-hmm. Because the people are the ones who actually need to be. So it's not a reintegration of humans, it's a reintegration of the architecture profession into how humans need to dwell.
Of course.
So it was a little. So that's where I started, and over the years while teaching, I've been teaching now for 23 years. Practice, of course, right after I came back, started my own practice, and have always sort of had my hands in both sides or my feet on both the boards. And not just practice was not just a pure hardcore architecture practice. It was a multidisciplinary practice where we were talking about everywhere where design touches human beings.
Yeah.
And and the understanding of design and the understanding of what it means to even have an interface way back then. We're talking about, we were doing web design, we were doing book design, we were doing illustrations, we were doing graphics, we were doing massive exhibitions.
Lovely.
I think we were doing the largest exhibitions of the country at one point. And I have had a client who has been with us for 14 years. We were doing their annual exhibition for year on year. And this was the Gem and Jewelry Export Promotion Council of India.
Nice.
So it was it was a huge project. It was the biggest show of the country, B2B. And we were talking about what will get people back, right? How our experience is going to be made. So exhibition design was also about, not just about making pretty booths. We were actually talking about building experiences, building stories for people to come back to. So, I was always doing both and doing so many things. And my childhood friend has been my business partner, who's actually an accessory designer from NIFT. I was from Shashant myself, and then France, and then so we were also talking very different languages. So I also wanted to actually see how these languages get bridged, because that's what people talk, right? So we were really looking at all of these crossovers continuously. And in the middle of it, when you're teaching, your the crossover kind of just comes in, right? You kind of bring it all in, and you're wondering why everybody else is not acknowledging that you can't just teach that much. And that's the big difference between, I think, how the people who taught us, what they believed in, and what the current generation is working towards. So more for that later, but PhD became sort of an outcome of all of these years of experience, right? And I used to hear my colleagues lamenting about the fact that we don't get good fresh graduates, and they are not suitable, and we are looking at, there's only so much that we can teach. As academicians, there's only so much we can teach, but as practitioners, we want everything to be already taught, and we want ready-made solutions given to us, because we are really in that rat race of getting projects, doing projects, getting projects, doing projects, right? And as academicians, we are talking about education in a larger sense, and we are talking about what it means to actually educate somebody to be an architect who may or may not practice architecture in the future, right? But what is this knowledge that we are imbibing into the society? So this is where the PhD came in, trying to create this relationship, or trying to see what this relationship entails when when you're actually talking about what practice needs, but also what education needs.
So tell me how, so from being called a militant or so-called militant about 20 years ago, the architects that I speak to these days, they're very much into the idea of, it should be nice for the people who are dwelling in a particular place. So that mindset has really changed. Do you feel that the architecture has changed over the past 2 decades as well?
Of course it has. And this is really, what I was referring to earlier, that the people, how we have been taught, the people that we have been taught by, and when we were students, the kind of curriculum that was there, it sort of covered a much larger purview. So architecture, there was sociology, there's history, there's geography, there's understanding of so much more, there's psychology, there's human behavior. And the architects of that time were actually leaders. They were thinkers and leaders of the society. So I myself, our dean was Professor M.M. Rana, who was a Padma Shri, who had learned from the best in the world. Frank Lloyd Wright came and worked with the best over here, and worked with Nehruji to make Teen Murti Bhavan and all of the other things, Nehru Memorial Museum to be library to be exact. And really, somebody who was talking about the larger gain in architecture. Say
Yeah.
architecture is not just about building buildings. So that's where the difference is. Now we are teaching students to build buildings
Yeah.
without giving them that purview, and practice itself is doing that without really becoming the mover and shaker in the society. We are no longer the mover and shaker of society, whereas today if you ask me who is a well-known architect in a country that's as big as ours, that not just you and me who are sort of in the discipline or aligned to it, no, but what the public knows. Who will there's a thing about architects probably being given some kind of Padma Bhushan or Padma Shri maybe, and it's like that time उस जमाने में पता था कौन है, इस जमाने में वो पता नहीं है कि कौन है, who is the one. So architects are not thinkers anymore. Architects are in some sense not even the makers anymore.
Right.
Because it's the construction industry. There's so many other people who've gotten involved.
Yeah.
So the discipline or the profession itself has expanded.
Okay.
It's including so many other people.
Yeah.
So where does the architect come in? And the architect is not a maker. Earlier, craftsman, maker, everything was the architect, right? The thinker is somebody else. What are you? You're just somebody who actually creates those designs and believes in the finality of those, and then just communicates it to your client.
Interesting.
And you're just in a it's a very, very narrow sort of exchange between you and the world.
Yeah, I suppose that also goes for buildings that are done in a very type A sort of format. But there are some buildings which they stand out. उसमें कुछ ना कुछ something has been incorporated in such a way that it stands out in terms of designs, in terms of functionality. Perhaps architecture or architect that has conceptualized it can be proud of it. So do you feel that the amount of architects that are coming out with good work are very narrow as compared to perhaps what was there earlier?
Well, don't get me wrong, there are great architects in the country. There's some great work that has happened. So I'm not disparaging that at all. What I'm trying to say is that that if you look at the way the 90% of our population lives, it's on a different plane altogether. You step out from here, you see where is the input of the architects. In the surrounding area, right? So these are little beacons of good buildings, and or buildings which stand out. There are a lot of clients who will obviously definitely
be open to their idea as well.
They will like the approach. They'll be proud of what the work that is there. But those are very far and in between. My point is slightly different. My point is that it's not about being able to make a good building, or a building that you and I like. There's also aspirations that you and I might have that we have to fulfill, right? But my point is that giving direction to those aspirations
is very important.
Is the architect's job, right? So if the direction is with these glass buildings of Gurgaon, then that's the common person just imbibes that and thinks that's the idea of good.
Correct.
Right? Whereas it is not in our climate, in our society, in the way we live, in our communities, it's not. So it is up to the architect to actually sort of bring this forward and, for the lack of a better word, educate the people around. Though I find it's probably the other way around these days, that people are so well traveled, the rest of the 10% is so well traveled, has so much information at their
that they want to be.
They know themselves what they want. So they have the internet and they have, this thing, and they have access and they are world traveled and they know, okay, we've seen this and we want this, right? So it's actually who's leading this is very different.
Interesting.
My point is that we've changed our leadership position.
Okay.
Not that we don't make good buildings. So that's what the difference is today, I feel, in the...
So coming to the implementation side of things, architecture is one of those industries that people often talk about. You learn by doing. Do you feel that students that you've taught previously, they have had some sort of a reality check or a reality shock when they go from the classroom onto the implementation side of things, and they're not able to fulfill, the principal architects, or the person that they're building for, their idea or the vision, and also what the structure should look like.
Yeah, definitely that's a big concern that happens, and just it's also a part of my PhD where I have talked to interns. So I've been talking to interns and dealing with this for years now, but when it gets into a formalized, in a formal manner where you have a questionnaire that you launch, and there's and you kind of analyze that by standard procedures, there becomes a sort of validity to your answer, right? So I'm going to give you an answer which is a bit of both, right?
Okay.
But which kind of corroborated what I was feeling all this while.
Right.
Students learn, and this is a problem of our architecture curriculum. It's not the students' issue, right?
Okay.
Students learn in bubbles,
Yeah.
in isolation.
Yeah.
Students learn to be the creative genius. The real world does not need
It's
a creative
very multifaceted,
genius.
yeah.
Yes, it needs multidisciplinarity or
Yeah.
transdisciplinarity, more
Yeah.
like talking to people, communities, talking to your other stakeholders in that process. Like I said,
Yeah.
today the stakeholders in an architectural design process are multiple.
Yeah.
So you don't design in isolation. You design by talking. You design by brainstorming, by
Yeah.
exchanging, and in that you have a trouble because your great idea is now no longer considered to be great because you came from that solitary position.
Yeah.
I know I am the one and
Yeah.
only one all be all of this thing, right?
Yeah.
But students are taught isolate in this way, and
Yeah.
every place does it.
Yeah. Okay.
Not a single place in this country has actually been able to incorporate any kind of multidisciplinarity in their teaching of their projects, right? So there is an absolute lack of a client, which is understandable. But
Yeah.
there is absolute lack of an alternate thought process,
Yeah.
brainstorming, individual projects. Students have troubles doing group work.
Yeah.
It's always उसने काम नहीं किया, मैंने काम नहीं किया, मैंने किया, उसने किया. That is the struggle.
Yeah.
Whereas the group work is actually supposed to teach you how to work in teams.
Yeah. Especially when you're doing working
And-
with different vendors.
Yeah, and diverse teams
Yeah.
are stronger.
Yeah. True.
That is true. It's been proven across the globe.
Yeah.
It's Harvard Review, baseline
Yeah.
of design thinking.
Yeah.
Diverse teams are stronger.
Yeah.
But we don't have that experience.
So when you said you've been speaking to interns or even students for that matter, how do you help them bridge that gap? What
They
do you
don't know
tell
how to
them?
communicate. See, they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to talk.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know how to accept,
Yeah.
any thoughts.
Okay.
They don't know how to bridge thoughts.
Yeah.
They believe that the good design is good because they say so. Right?
Yeah. Right.
And just recently, in fact, last week, one of my ex-students he's called me and he said that, ma'am, I'm having this trouble. I've made this wonderful design, and this is a small firm that he's gone into, who also is an ex-student.
Okay.
But he's saying, but बिल्कुल अच्छा नहीं, वो उनको पसंद नहीं आ रहा, this, that, and the other. So I just, I was telling him that, good design is not just something that looks pretty for you.
Yeah.
Good design is what works for everybody around.
Correct.
Good design, if the client wants to save money, then anything that you do, if
Yeah.
you done an extravagant design, it's not good design.
Yeah.
So you have to acknowledge that the client wants to save money, and which client doesn't want to save money?
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
But this concept is not there. It's like against your design thinking, right? Because you need to be extravagant, right? As in, you do an exercise that reduce the amount of you make a good design as you perceive it, and then make a similar experience with half the materials.
Yeah.
Design does not cost.
Yeah.
Materials cost.
Yeah.
Right? So you make the same thing with half the materials used, and you will see that your client will accept, your vendors will accept, your
So it's so funny you say that, because architecture and design world, you're meant to be thinkers, you're meant to be such creative people, but the practicality comes into it in some way, shape, or form, or then it not limits you, I would say, but then you have to abide by these guidelines.
Which is where we have a slightly wrong position. Creativity for the heck of creativity
Is not
creativity.
Yeah, okay.
Today, even the business domain is a creative domain.
Yeah.
What with the disruptive innovations, what with the kind of things that the world is doing today, right?
Yeah.
Creativity has no bounds. It's not bound by architecture and design.
Yeah.
And to believe that everything is non-creative is a misunderstanding we are propagating for our own selves.
Yeah.
So, like I said, a good design is not is something that sells, right? Something that works.
Yeah.
Something, and it always reminds me what Steve Jobs' famous statement: "Design is not what it looks like. Design is how it works."
So
This
true.
if without that you cannot say that it's good design. It isn't. It's in your head. You are living in a fool's paradise.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to balance all of these pushes and pulls and create something which is responsible and useful and valuable for the people you are building
for the end user. Yeah. So you spoke about communication, you spoke about a little bit of practicality, that are perhaps the critical skills that a designer should have. Is there anything else that makes them stand out?
I'm saying, it's not as much communication as it is teamwork.
Okay.
Collaboration.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
very big.
Collaboration, working with people, working alongside, being able to use what somebody else has to offer to you or to the process, to be able to recognize that, to be able to channelize that.
Yeah.
It's a bigger job, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to do it in a responsible way. And I will bring this back again, because in the middle you also said the word sustainability.
Yeah.
And I will call it responsibility.
Yeah, okay.
As today's designer, we don't have we can't be true to what we are doing if we don't respond to what is actually needed.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just what is wanted, but it's what is needed.
Very
so
true.
That is a very crucial thing that we need to inculcate. And it's surprising. I'll give you a bit of a recent thing that has happened. So we have in architecture this body called the NASA, which is National Association of Architecture Students of Architecture.
Yeah.
Just last week, for the first time in the history of NASA, they have actually released a statement, which the Council of Architecture has also put it up on their website, which is talking about the problem that these students are facing in this relation, right? They're talking about we are taught curriculums which are outdated.
Yeah.
We don't know what we are doing. We are paid very less. Our internships are really difficult to handle, and we don't have any cutting edge technology that we are taught in schools, right? And we are also not taught to be responsible citizens to the extent of sustainability. ये सब है ही नहीं curriculum में. And I'm not talking about some one-off school which will say हम तो sustainability करते हैं. Because आज कोई डेट में बोल नहीं सकता कि नहीं हम sustainability नहीं करते, तो सब बोलेंगे हम sustainability करते हैं.
In some way,
right?
Yeah.
सब बोलेंगे नहीं technology तो integrated है, right? But on the ground, this has not actually been implemented. It's not happened, and the students are suffering because of it. And there is a big mismatch between what is being projected versus what is actually happening. And here, the smaller schools, the tier 2, tier 3 city schools, or some other big schools also are struggling because see, architecture profession itself has not recognized where it's at today.
Okay.
And are we teaching architects, students to become architects to kind of feed into the profession, or are we teaching them to be citizens, to be globally minded, to do other things, to generate value?
Yeah.
So this mismatch,
okay,
for a long time,
Yeah.
schools have taught what is needed in practice. But if you look at the number of people who actually practice in the traditional sense of the word, is minuscule.
Yeah.
Right? But they do other things, and so why aren't we teaching architects to go into policy, urban policies?
Yeah. Very important these days.
And get into having a voice,
Yeah.
an educated or a learned voice in government policy making of urban design, urban planning, urban practices. But we are not. We are not. We are teaching architects to go into practice and it's almost like we are making ourselves into sweatshops for practice.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
And that's a huge.
It's like a factory.
Yeah.
You're just churning out
Exactly.
architects with
Exactly.
less value that's being
Exactly.
generated.
Absolutely.
So, is there you spoke about collaborations, you
Yeah.
spoke about activities or assignments that students would do together to develop these skills. Is there a particular activity which you would like to perhaps start with, or you already doing, or you were doing with your students, which would inculcate those very critical skills in them?
Yeah, well, I believe there is not one thing that is the end all and be all of this kind of thinking. It's a 5-year long learning, unlearning process in various ways. But I have for the longest of time taught in the second year of architecture.
Yeah.
And I have led the second year design studio and then I was also leading the whole of the design studio track of at Shoshan.
Okay.
So I was looking at all the 5 years and what does it mean, and
Yeah.
how do things sort of in that पुराने ज़माने में वो switchboard होता था ना,
Yeah.
यहाँ से निकाला
Piecing the
वहाँ डाला
puzzles,
वहाँ से
yeah.
निकाला. How does it kind of map out, right?
Okay.
What does this world look like?
Yeah.
And how does it incrementally give you an outcome, right? So doing all of that and teaching, I realized that I was not suited for maybe the first year teaching.
Okay.
At that time.
Yeah.
Maybe now I can.
Yeah.
Because I do believe that we need to have a certain vocabulary which is very important.
Yeah.
And also I think we treat our first year students really with kids' gloves, and I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Because they come through a very rigorous educational class 12.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason to suddenly say, oh, ab kuch aur, your kids, you can't do this, you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
We don't take that what it comes. We just lament about yahan to ye nahi karte, wahan to ye nahi karte, and we don't know. So second year was when I was able to actually get to the students really, in their minds.
Yeah.
And I used to generally run a studio which was an experiential design studio.
Okay.
And it's always been about how to acknowledge design not just as design of something that looks pretty, but always about again people, again histories, again the context, the past, and also what means context isn't even the current context. What are we surrounded by? Who are we?
Yeah.
And not keeping away from the idea of the want again.
Yeah.
And really acknowledging what is needed,
Yeah.
how to do it. Thinking through the body is something I work very well hard for. With we are human beings.
Yeah.
We perceive space in a 3-dimensional way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't perceive space in a 2-dimensional way.
Yeah.
Right? But architecture is taught in plans and sections and elevations, which is 2-dimensional, which is a very big disconnect between the body and the
so true.
And the the hand.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not able to make that connection. So I would always be working with 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
My studios were known to be हाँ तो बहुत models हैं,
हाँ.
because everything was analog, everything was correlating the mind to the hand.
Yeah.
And basically looking at the world around you 3-dimensionally, really actively absorbing what it means and what it means for the body to move. So when does a person actually walk into a space and say, wow, like what does it take for that to happen, right? For the body to react this way. What does it take for you to go into a place and be quiet?
Yeah.
What kind of space, how do you do that?
So can I ask you, is it, so you said you basically deal with these things in the year 2,
in second year.
Second year. Why is this not being done in the first year, because it's such a foundational thing.
It should be, but like I said, that I've not taken too many first year studios.
Yeah.
Because of this, the systemic understanding that first year में तो ये होना चाहिए, basic design principles आने चाहिए.
हाँ.
So you do your gestalt and you do
Yeah.
your basic design
Yeah.
compositions
Yeah.
and this that. And that was a systemic problem that I could not overcome with
Right.
the system around,
Okay.
right? With people, with their mindsets, with my colleagues, right? It was not something they were comfortable with doing.
Okay.
So sometimes that change is not relevant because it doesn't, take forward very
Fair.
well, right? So it's only relevant when we all get together and acknowledge and work with it, right? So and of course I'm not saying my process or my thoughts are the only valid ones. Everybody's thoughts are valid.
Is there a body that governs that what structure should be done in each of the architecture schools, or is it just up to each
No,
architecture school to implement its own course?
So the Council of Architecture again governs the educational and the professional,
side
which
of
is things. They don't necessarily say you have to do this or you have to do that.
Okay.
But there is an accepted thing that ये होना चाहिए.
Okay.
Which is also something that I react to. That ये होना चाहिए means nothing. Today you are teaching what we learned in the same process when 30 years back I have
Right.
learned. More than 30 years back.
Yeah.
फर्स्ट ईयर में ऐसा होना चाहिए, सेकेंड ईयर में ऐसा होना चाहिए, थर्ड ईयर में ऐसा होना चाहिए, फोर्थ ईयर में ऐसा होना चाहिए, फिफ्थ ईयर में ऐसा होना चाहिए. The world is completely different today. Those typologies probably don't exist in that form.
Yeah.
They exist very differently. And my innate belief is, and this is also a part of my work, that typological teaching, if you teach somebody to make a school, because होना चाहिए, you teach somebody to make a school, and in some other larger institution, an office, a commercial, a housing, small house from the first year, right?
Yeah.
And that's all you're teaching them, and
Yeah.
as if that one project that they did is going to suffice them in their whole life of, on that,
Yeah.
right? What we are not teaching them is a mindset, a methodology of, an understanding which is deeper than just a typology. How they will make impact. So I would say that what if we started teaching based on impact, right? So a small house is generally taught in the first year,
Okay.
right, as a typology.
Yeah.
And the concept is that it's a small idea and you can deal with it without all the complicated whatever things that go with it. And I don't know if you're practicing, you're working with clients. A house is one of the most difficult things to do if you really want to get it right.
There's so many different stakeholders who are part of
and
the...
you teach that in the first year when you have no conception. So you are actually teaching the solitary genius method, right? And then you say that okay, 2 रूम है, 3 बेडरूम है, ये है वो है. It's a standard protocol.
Yeah.
Do you teach how XYZ community lives, right? When if that happens, it happens in pockets, but the house has to be taught, right? Has to be taught in the first year. And I will say, when I look at the idea of impact, it is one of the most impactful things in the world today, right? Because every human being will inhabit,
lives in a house,
right? So it is actually something that is valid for a larger discourse rather than a smaller discourse. But you kind of remove all of that discourses and you just teach char diwar, which is where a lot of mismatch happens in a typological thinking. So I would say, for example, if you said, okay, let's teach a house to make a home which is gender neutral, or which has a gendered positionality because it's in a particular community. You are impacting so much more, right? You are impacting every human being by bringing these constructs into your thought process.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the international universities. Are there well-renowned universities out there globally which are bridging this gap between implementation and education really well?
If you talk about the US, there are, their agendas have been in discussion from a long time, this sort of thing. There was a very famous report called the Boyle Report, which actually brought this up, I think, early 90s.
Okay.
But so, they've been doing it, they've been talking about it. There's a sort of complete churning that's happening. But the system over there is very different because, there you don't get to practice right after you finish your 5 years. In India, that is the case.
Okay.
There you actually have to do all your licensing, and it's a long process to get licensing done. Over years it takes people to do.
Yeah.
So it's much more rigorous in that sense. So that world is a slightly different world.
Yeah.
But if you look at, say, UK, right, and if you look at globally today, the best school, and it has been for a bit now, it's called the Bartlett.
Yeah.
And they have been number one across for many years. And if you look at how their curriculum has evolved, if you look at what they are teaching, if you look at so they are based on labs. They are based, it's not about a studio as we call it here. It's a studio, but it's a studio is more about it becoming a lab of experimenting, new ideas, new thought processes, again, ideas of new materials getting incorporated. There are a lot of streams that come out of it. That would a place like, say, Architecture Association, AA, is also doing in UK, where you are talking about integration of technology very strongly into this, and they've been doing it for so many years. It's a so their approach has been very, very much more multidisciplinary.
Okay.
Then and we are in that. And in India, we are again absorbing what the West has done, but not
Slightly
changing
differently.
it to our requirements,
Yeah.
right? So we are still in that same boat, British time
Yeah.
original वो था process,
yeah.
उसी को हम use कर रहे हैं.
How's your experience in France?
Yeah, France has a very different approach.
Yeah.
They are because of the history and the heritage and the past. There is a and actually the source of the modern architectural thought process was in terms of education was in the École des Beaux-Arts in France.
Okay.
That's where it began.
Yeah.
Where they started talking about institutionalization of a practice-based discipline. So actually they have but they've evolved. They've gone from talking in a very, 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 very closed way to a very different approach. When I was studying over there, I found that, and I was doing a master's. I did a master's in landscape architecture, landscape planning more. And then I was doing a master's MPhil in urban theories and urban and housing and urban theories. And I realized that the theoretical premise is much stronger, right? There's much more thinking involved, and they are, much more linked to what's going on, especially in Europe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, around Europe, they may not be able to comment, but there's a research bent of mine.
Okay.
There's a thought process. Even when you're practicing, you're actually doing it with a purpose. There's a purpose to your practice,
Yeah.
which is very different from how we approach it here.
Okay.
So it was quite mind opening,
Okay.
to be in that environment, to
Yeah.
really talk about things which were not being discussed. So I went essentially to learn attitudes,
Yeah.
right? And I was exposed to a completely different method
Interesting.
of doing things.
So let's talk about your thesis now.
Yeah.
Systemic relationship between education and implementation. What does it practically mean? Like, if you have to really narrow it down and dumb it for me, dumb it down for me, please.
No. See, first of all, it's a systemic relationship between education and practice.
Yeah.
As in the architectural practice. What
Yeah.
is going on in practice today, right? Or practice itself. What does the world need? And how can we prepare architects to fulfill a requirement which is larger than what this particular practice is, right? Because we are fulfilling a social requirement.
Okay.
We are fulfilling it for the society,
Yeah.
right? It's not just these two things, right? So there's the understanding that, like I mentioned earlier, education for practice for to be able to practice, or education for citizenship, education for a larger purpose. These are debates which have been going on in education for a long time. But the way it is that, relevance to society today, and came out in my research, today the society is very different and it's transforming very fast, right? With the way technology has come in, right? We couldn't have imagined that 10 years back, right? And it's going to evolve. It's going to involve what COVID did, right? COVID made us change everything that we knew about architecture on its head, right? Spaces were no longer, all, closed in. They had to be opened out because you needed something, but everything had to be there. There was proximity. There's so many other things, changeability, adaptability was such a very important thing that came out. So these things are suddenly coming, and there's so much change happening. Society is changing. The way people live is changing. The way people want to live is changing. Access to information, sustainability, the climate change that's happening. There's so much change, right? So the world is changing so fast, and practice is trying to catch up, trying to say, okay, हम क्या करें? अब हम क्या करें? Instead of being the thinkers, like I said, we are now trying to catch up. The world, and education is even further behind, saying that हमको तो practice के लिए करना है, हमको तो दुनिया को तो देखना ही नहीं है. We are looking at the practice because we want to prepare architects who can practice, right? But but traditionally, in any discipline of the world, which is an established discipline, education leads the front. Right? Education is where all the change happens. Education is where you think of research, you think of collaboration, you think of all things. But practice, in our case, it's not the practice, neither the education, it's actually the society which is actually leading change.
How do we bridge this gap then?
So the gap, first of all, this acknowledgement that who are we building for, right? This acknowledgement, what are we changing? So to actually see around us that how the world is changing. To be able to integrate that into, that's what my work is about. So if I say that society is, one of the outcomes of my research was that what is the most important change in architecture today is a social change, right? So then I can't teach that same house in the same way, na? So now practice is also is catching up, right? 100%. But practice is probably going to catch up soon, because otherwise they'll be moved out of everything. Because there are other professionals coming in. There are project managers and so many other people who are coming into large projects. We are not the decision makers in large projects anymore. The government has a very different way of running its bigger contracts, right? EPC contracts. Architect is not even in the picture. It's the contractor that's leading the EPC contract, right? So if we have to acknowledge that all of this is happening, then we can say, okay, what is the way to actually bring all of this into education in such a way that we are not actually teaching them skills which they'll get over in the next 5 years, right? But we are teaching them approaches and mindsets and to be thought leaders. So today, if we can't teach them how to be leaders in the society and thought leaders, and talking about, I will keep coming back to the sustainability agenda, because the world is not going to go back to excess use of resources.
So true.
So we have to be the leaders to teach how to build less, do less, achieve more, and we have the wherewithal. So the way this gap is going to be integrated is through research.
Lovely.
Research is the only way. The third pillar, which is the society, which is research.
Is there a research organization for?
So apparently every school has
research wing?
PhDs, and they do PhDs, but that's not the kind of research I'm talking about. I'm talking about even in practice, what an architect solves, right? Innovates, solves a problem, right? There's a way to actually incorporate that into what are we teaching, right? We teach from books which are written 40 years back or 50 years back, building construction. Those materials are not available at all anymore, or they are less, or they are outdated, or they are they are protected materials. You can't do anything with them anymore. Wood, this, that, but we are not teaching, say, concrete, even as concrete which is highly energy guzzling. We are not teaching them other forms of concrete which are energy saving, which are self-growing, so much more.
So can you paint me a scenario? 10 years from now,
Yeah.
what would the world look like if we do not, if we let this gap widen,
Yeah.
or if we shrink this gap? In both scenarios, what will it look like?
So I think the gap is not just about gap between architecture and education, practice and education.
Yeah.
Why? Because the understanding of it as a discipline, right?
Yeah.
The discipline means a 360 degrees, which means
100%.
practice,
Multifaceted.
education,
Yeah.
research, innovation,
Education,
development,
yeah.
society, all of these things
Correct.
get in. That's what
Yeah.
NEP, National Education Policy 2020, is trying to get to.
Yeah.
Right? So everything is integrated. Innovation is so. The gap is not that it's just education and practice. It's that we are not catching all of these other pillars of this relationship.
Yeah.
Right? We're not incorporating it. What the first thing that will happen is the value of architecture is going to reduce further because somebody else is going to do the job that you are refusing to acknowledge. So practice is going to suffer. Right? It's already suffering. No matter what people say, we have lots of projects, there's a lot of construction going on, but what is the value that you're getting for the work that you're doing, right? Everybody is just building at the least cost, least responsible approaches. You're looking at a very short term thing, right? So, and then comes this, so you take less from your clients because you want jobs, and then comes the student. So the student gets lesser because we can't
It's a
pay that
cycle,
much,
yeah.
and the whole value chain of the discipline has reduced.
Yeah.
Right? So the problem will happen is that we will cease to be important.
Yeah.
And that's a scary place to be in if we don't acknowledge that we have to be the thought leaders, and we have to actually direct how the world, how we have to be the orchestrators of change,
yeah.
rather than be at the receiving end, which is what we are right now. So
how often is the curriculum revised?
in principle, curriculums are revised all the time. Every year we are supposed to make some changes. There are some accreditation bodies, but in practice, curricula has hardly changed between what has happened 10 years back to what is happening now. Very minimal change, or if it is, it's because it's forced by the government. So NEP is in making us change. 2020 NEP came, nobody knew how to implement it. We still don't know how to implement it in architecture. We're still struggling. Council of Architecture again has given us a whatever that aise karo. There's a draft report. But we are still trying to do the same thing with a different cover. We just changed our clothes. Our core structure, skeletal system has remained the same. We haven't really changed that much.
What's the biggest piece of advice you'd like to give a student who is graduating this year?
Like I've been saying throughout, that we as architects or designers of this world have the power to change things. We have the power to influence lives. We have to acknowledge that there's a power there, right? And that with that power comes a sort of responsibility. And to be responsible, to not just do things because
they're meant to be done.
It's something that the client says ye kar do, or that's not to say don't do what the client is saying, but to actually be able to get something deeper out of it, have a meaning behind it, have that purpose, and align with that purpose our responsibility to communicate the purpose. So don't lose. So I think this generation, it's very interesting.
Transactional.
This generation, we might think it's transactional, but it's also the only generation, like I said, NASA. The students are saying we need to learn, right? So this generation is actually a very, very idealistic generation. They want to achieve. They are lazy about it, but they want things, right? They want change. And I think the students of this generation can actually become the beacons of that hope that we have, that you have to set the things right, that I'm sorry to say my generation is messed up. Because it's my generation that has caused all of this. And so be idealistic. I'm still that. Live my life with that. Be idealistic, be responsible. have fun.
Yeah.
Have lots of fun, because
Very important.
it's very good. It's great to for it to for you to sustain yourself, that passion that that will carry you forward, but do it responsibly and do it with a sense of purpose.
Are there any books you would recommend?
No.
No?
Because there's just so many books,
Yeah.
right? So there's no one thing, right? I think we need to keep our eyes open, our hearts open, our minds open. We need to be constantly reading the world, constantly absorbing, constantly, pick up something, read something, do something, make it mean something.
Yeah.
There's so much work out there, internationally, nationally. People have talked about how fuel is an important aspect of creating better buildings, right? The kind of fuel dictates the kind of buildings that will be made, right? Because how you transport, how you bring, what happens. There's just, it's a huge world out there. So I think I will just say that be open and be observant and be a constant sponge to really acknowledge what's going on around you.
You've almost done with your PhD, sort of finishing up?
PhD submitted,
Would you recommend a PhD in architecture to people out there?
Yeah, sure, but there's two kinds of people who do PhD.
Yeah.
There's two or three kinds maybe. Doing a PhD for the sake of a PhD is not something I will recommend at all.
Okay.
Because that's what's needed in our academia these days. Everybody has to be a PhD to be in academics, and I think in the kind of discipline that we are in, it may not necessarily mean the same thing as in another, basic sciences.
Yeah.
There I would say definitely do, right? But in architecture, I would again say what you do has to have some value. It has to contribute, and it has to mean something.
Yeah.
You have to want to mean it, right? So if you want to do a PhD, it has to have deeper meaning than just getting that degree.
Yeah.
Right. I that's the reason why I am doing my PhD now, because I didn't feel ready to do it then. When I was in France, I was already doing my MPhil, was the first year of a PhD, but I didn't feel ready. I didn't think that I was, I had what it takes to really see something more than what it is, right? And that's not to say that, young people can't do, or, but it's a sort of do it with again purpose. Do it for it to mean something. It doesn't mean that if you do a PhD that you have to only be in academics. You can get into back into practice, research. It does change your mind.
Yeah.
A good PhD will change your mind.
Lovely.
And you will be a different person, and you will find different paths from it.
Great. Well, soon to be Dr. Amrita Madan. Thank you very much for taking out the time and walking us through the systemic relationship. But also, your passion is very infectious. I hope that there are some learnings that people can take out of it. Things that seem to be very plain and simple are not as plain and simple. You have to put in an emotional component into your field of work that you're putting in, irrespective of wherever you are.
Correct.
You obviously come from an architecture sort of background, so that is what you're sort of passing on to the next generation.
If somebody asks me, would you do architecture now? I would say definitely, because it's something I have such deep equations with.
Yeah.
I would do architecture again.
Yeah.
If I had to.
Lovely. That's what you want to hear. That if the famous question is, if you were to wipe everything and would you, if we had to start all over again, would you choose the same path? And people who say yes, that's how you know that you're truly passionate about it. Thank you once again for being here, taking the time out.
Thank you.
And I hope the viewers enjoy this as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. As I told you, I will be a sponge from the get-go, be as your student, and I've definitely learned a fair bit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
It was quite a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.